presenter today is Susan Van Asselt, our very own mental health and substance use clinician. So we're really quite thrilled to have her with us. The session will run from 3 to 5:30. It's going to be presented by Susan and some of her colleagues. She's going to be introducing them to you. There'll be time for questions and answers after each section is presented. But if there are things that come up while one of the speakers is talking, please put your question in the chat, because we want to keep track of those. So the session is going to be recorded, but if you are not comfortable with being recorded, please turn off your camera. We also want to let you know that any questions that are presented to us, we are going to be edited out in the final version to, just to respect your confidentiality. If you're having any kind of tech issues at all, you can put your question about the tech issue in the chat and we will deal with that as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Susan to you. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Greetings and welcome. I'll just get my PowerPoint up. And yeah, it's nice to see everybody here today on this very rainy day. I am co-presenting this workshop with two people, Laurie Swanson and Kay Armstrong. And Laurie hasn't joined yet, so we're hoping that she will join soon. And Kay is here. Kay, maybe you could wave your hand. So that's Kay there. And so Laurie and Kay worked with Laurie and Kay over the 30 beginning were my mentors. Then they became for Laurie in Kay's instance, for a very short time, she was my supervisor. For Laurie's instance, she was my supervisor for a very long time. And then they became co-workers and friends. So between the three of us, we have about over 100 years of substance use experience in the field. Lots of from very diverse points of view. So I am the mental health and substance use clinician on Galiano Island. My forte and my strength has always been direct clinical work supporting people. So I've done that for the last 35 years, first in community living, then in child protection, and then finally moving to mental health and substance use, which has always been my favorite. And I'll let Kay introduce herself briefly.
Oh, nice to hear from you, Susan. As Susan says, we've known each other for quite a long time in various capacities and roles. My situation presently is, as of November 7th, I'm now 7 days into retirement, and I'm already an expert. I'm getting better at it every day. But I did work for probably about 40 years in human services work, and most of that was in the substance use field. So I have a lot of experience. When I started off way back when, I figured I would crack the problem of substance use in my career. That was the goal that I set for myself early on. And I can tell you that I failed spectacularly at that. So I'm still learning and still talking about it.
Lovely. Yes. And Laurie, are you there? I don't see her on Zoom yet, but if Laurie comes, she is the, she has been a manager with mental health and substance use in interior health and a variety of different roles, a huge amount of experience. So let's hope she shows. Okay, we'll move on. So so in the last 5, 6, 7 years or so, there's been a very big paradigm shift with mental health, with substance use. And the paradigm shift, part of that paradigm shift has been the government of Canada legalizing marijuana. So that happened in about 2017 or so. But and also along with that came the shift from seeing drugs as a a bad thing, and the war on drugs and that kind of thing, and turning it into more of a harm reduction kind of a model. And really what started to come up, which a lot of people started to talk about, not the least of which was Johann Hari, is that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And so he has this great TED talk that you can watch at any time. The link is in the reference section at the end. But if you Google Johann Hari and TED Talk, you'll get his TED Talk, which is an amazing kind of synopsis of the research that has been done, particularly in Vancouver and Victoria. So Vancouver and Victoria are two of the leading substance use research places in the world. And so we're very close to them here on Galliano Island. Kay might have some things to say about that. But and so when I was creating these slides, I was looking at how many of the quotes that we can put on this slide are all about human connection. And so when you have it as the war on drugs, it's very individualistic and very isolative. When people are, here's Laurie, great. It's very individualistic and very isolative. And so it's now with the whole focus on harm reduction, the whole focus on public health as opposed to the war on drugs, it's become more about human connection and that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's what we're talking about here. Bruce Alexander is from Vancouver, and he did a huge created a theory of dislocation, which was also about connection, and that it's a societal problem as opposed to an individual problem or a war on drugs. And Laurie and Kay, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, Susan, thanks.
Okay, welcome, Laurie.
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry I'm late. I had one of the local politicians knock on my door.
Oh.
Yeah. So
would you like to say? Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just having a conversation with her, and yes, Bruce Alexander has contributed significantly to a clearer and different understanding. He also talks about addiction in socioeconomic terms, and he has premised that a capitalist economy is a ripe setting for addictions to develop, because in the capitalist economy, consumption is one of the main driving behaviors. And so he talks about addiction as any behavior that people continue in spite of experiencing harms. And so he named golf, gambling, substances, sex, shopping, all manifestations of addiction that he theorizes occur in the context of capitalism. So there's the Marxist bent for you.
Thanks, Laurie. That's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also, so the CISUR that is here, this is the Institute for Substance Use Research, located at the University of Victoria in Victoria. So this this research institute is very close by, and you can visit it if you want to. I visited it. Yeah. Okay, so that's what we're talking about today, and the lens that we're bringing to this presentation. Yeah, this presentation is interactive, so we'll have some interactive things that we're going to talk about. So now, the first thing we want to do now is we want to see what you know about problematic substance use. So if everybody can get your phone, and I'm going to click on this, and it will tell us join the Kahoot game. So this is a series of 5 or 6 questions, and you're going to be able to use your phone to answer the questions, and it'll come up. It's all very anonymous. Nobody gets to see who said what. And the more what we're looking for here is what do you know, and how do we need to what do we need to say in this presentation that you're going to learn a few things. So if everybody gets your phone ready, and it's going to come up, and the website that will come up is kahoot.it. So if you click on kahoot.it, you will, right here, www.kahoot.it, join that. And then when it says to add the game pin, this is the game pin right here, 4062033. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to join that. And maybe while we're waiting, Laurie, do you want to say a little bit about yourself? Where you come from in terms of addiction?
Sure. Good afternoon. I first want to say that I've known Susan Van Asselt for 26 years as a friend and a colleague. And I think I met Kay in 2006. So the waters between us run deep. I met Susan when we were working in the community living sector, and that was the beginning of our professional collaboration and the wellspring of our friendship as well. And we've practiced addictions medicine together since 2005, which was when the health authorities brought in contract addiction services from a community nonprofit into the health authority. And so Kay was then seconded to lead the merger of the two system streams. And Susan and I were both on that committee. And Kay, nod if you remember.
I remember. Yes.
Yeah. And we worked very hard for a year to merge the two cultures and the two practices. If no one remembers, that was the year of the very unfortunate tsunami in Thailand and Indonesia. And we used that as a theme, just as metaphor for, it was acknowledgement of the tragedy and some locals impacted, as well as talking about the magnitude of merging two cultures that were much like land and water. So we did that work together, and then Susan and I continued to practice addictions medicine at the community level. Kay moved on to teach at the college. And then Susan and I also had occasion to facilitate a day treatment program, which was a wonderful experience, and then work as educators, training experienced and new clinicians addictions practice. So yes, we've done this work together for a long time, individually and together.
Lovely. And I think I see that everybody is frozen. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm going to start the Kahoot game if it will start, although it seems to have frozen. Leslie and Laurie, is there anything we can do about that? It's frozen. Everything's frozen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are you in Chrome?
There's my Zoom.
But you still, this is,
Yeah.
you seem totally frozen.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty frozen. Hopefully there's lots of people ready to play the Kahoot game. I can't even press start. So I can say the questions if we are totally frozen. Okay, we'll just carry on without the Kahoot game. I can't even bring the PowerPoint back up. So yeah, sorry about that. I guess that's the nature of unstable internet. Okay, so these are the questions that were on the Kahoot game that we were going to ask you to answer with a fun, interactive way of doing it. But maybe if you could jot down your answers and see what they are, and then hopefully all of these questions, if you get them all wrong, that's a-okay. If you get them all right, that's a-okay too. The idea was that we were going to be able to see who got them, if there was lots of people getting them right or wrong. But the idea would be that you can answer them all by the end of the presentation. So first question is, in what order do we progress through the stages of change? And then there was slides that said pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, maintenance, relapse. Contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, relapse, and pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. So the answer to that one is all five: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. Okay, the next question is, the most important idea for harm reduction is to focus on stopping use. Is this question true or false? I'll say it again. The most important idea for harm reduction is to focus on stopping use. Is that true or false? And the answer is, it is actually false. And Kay is going to give a presentation of harm reduction so that you'll see why that statement is false. The next question is, successful change with problematic substance use is aided by medication, connection, or both medication and connection? And the answer is both medication and connection. So it's there's a lot of evidence out there that shows that medication does work to help people withdraw off of their substance. And as we saw in the first slide, in terms of connection, what Johan Hari and Bruce Alexander and the Canadian Institute of Substance Use Research were all saying is that connection, being connected with your community, is really important in terms of stopping your substance use. The next question is, a website that provides information on addiction is, and
So Laurie, it sounds like the support people are asking us to talk while they troubleshoot to see if they can sort this tech issue out. Can everybody hear me as I'm talking, everybody that's watching this? Yeah, okay. So Laurie, you may have something that you want to do, but if not, maybe what we could do is just get into talking a little bit about some of those introductory concepts that we were going to start off with in the presentation. There are PowerPoint slides to support some of that, but we're not able to see them on the screen right now. Does that sound like a good idea? Or is that... Can you unmute? Okay, so it sounds like either it's me and only one person can be unmuted at a time. What I want, maybe I'll just start talking a little bit about we used to see addiction in kind of black and white terms. We used to see it either you were addicted or you weren't, you know, this person's an addict, this person isn't. And over the years, as we worked with people and shared our experiences and what we were learning, we came to a realization that actually addiction problems occur on a continuum. And in fact, not just problems, but all substance use occurs on a continuum. And that continuum goes from beneficial right through to harmful. And maybe some of you that are listening can think of examples of substance use that is beneficial. But examples that come to my mind would be things like people who are taking prescription drugs for a particular type of medical condition, or the classic kind of story that we hear in the news from time to time about how if you have a glass of wine once or twice a week, it's good for you, as opposed to harmful. I always wondered about that, but there seems to be a fair bit of research to support it. So what we do now when we're talking about these concepts is we look at them across that broad range, that broad spectrum of use, all the way from beneficial use through to sort of what we might call recreational use, to problem substance use, and all the way through to a medical condition that we might call substance dependence or addiction. So it's in that kind of context that we're walking with you today in this presentation through some of these ideas about problematic substance use and what the best way is, or what the best ways are to change it and move it around. Just as we're continuing to wait for these technical problems, I want to tell you a quick story about some work that I used to do with my students, where the people that would come into addictions courses that I was teaching, what I would ask them to do is to take on a change project of some kind. So for 4 weeks, they had to do something in their life differently than they had done it before. And classic examples would be things like stopping your use of coffee, or not eating sugar, or those kinds of things. And what we found year after year is that we all have habits, and we all have strong preferences about how we want to live and what we want to do, what brings us comfort and pleasure. And that all those things are hard to change. And so we learned that everybody deals with and struggles with these kinds of issues in their life. And it looks like, Susan, you're back. So how about if I stop talking now?
How lovely. I'm so glad that Kay and Laurie are here, because their wealth of experience will just carry us through no matter what's going on. So hopefully we all heard the Kahoot, and so we won't play Kahoot because we've gone through the questions. And if you got them right, then that's great. If you got them wrong, then that's great too. And we'll hopefully you'll have all be able to answer them all by the end of the presentation. So now we're moving to facts and stats. So I was asked to provide some facts and stats about addiction in this area. And instead of providing facts and stats of area, I thought I would direct you to the Canadian Institute for Substance Use Research. This has lots of great tools and information that anybody can join it. It's through the University of Victoria. And what I wanted to show you was the map. So you'll be able to look at this in detail yourselves whenever you want. But in terms of this area and how much substance is being used here, we'll just show you this quickly. So if we go to the data, we want information for the 2018, which is the latest they have. We want it for Galliano area. And then we want to, so we're going to use it for substance. The substance at this point is alcohol. We generate the map. And then we see that it gives for the whole of British Columbia, it gives an idea of how much alcohol is being drunk throughout the whole of British Columbia. So down here, we've got South Vancouver Island, which is where Galiano Island would be located. And if we were to go up a little bit, number for South Vancouver Island is 425.29, which if we look here is the second level. So the higher, the darker red it is, the more alcohol abuse there is that people end up requiring hospitalization for. So up in the north is more hospitalizations due to alcohol, drinking alcohol than down here. And so we can do that with the substance, change it to opioids, just so you see. And we click the map tool, and then we go here. And once again, so opioids down here, South Vancouver Island, 34.88, which is once again the second level. And Northern British Columbia, as you can see, has more hospitalizations from opioid abuse or overdose than our Southern Gulf Islands do. So you can do this with any substance you want to do it with. I just thought I would show you a little bit of how to do it and where you can go to find all this information. And Laurie, who's been, I think the other question that I had about this, the facts and stats, was how many, why does Galiano Island get the amount of mental health and substance use support that it gets? And that's a demographic issue that I think that Laurie will be able to answer.
Historically, funding for all services, addictions and healthcare is based on demographic formulas. So they look at urban, rural, and remote, and there are definitions for each of those words. The definitions you can find with Stats Canada. So that's one layer. And then they that has to do, for instance, with distance from services. That's one of the parameters of each of those definitions is distance from services. So that's a factor. And then they look at population. And I like to explain this because people assume that demographics is population only. So if you have 10,000 people or 100,000 people, but that's missing some of the other parameters that really help clarify how is the demographic tool applied. So it has to do also with density. So we've got the urban, rural, remote, you have the population, you have population density, and all of those factors come in. And then the nice people in accounting put all of the parameters together and come up. They factor in things like per diem. So per diem to run a service, per diem to operate as a nonprofit, per diem to operate a hospital. And all of those factors combine to create a funding formula. And I can't give you a specific now. I just know how the wheels turn. So is that helpful, Susan?
That's super helpful. Maybe there might be questions that we'd be happy to answer, but super helpful, hopefully, in terms of why Galiano Island has only one day every 2 weeks for mental health and substance use.
And one other factor, of course, would be this data, because the data that you're showing, Susan, indicates trends, historic and current. So there's many things that contribute to funding formulas. Yeah, and if you're from one of the other islands, then it would be similar, because we're all kind of lumped into this little spot down here, this South Vancouver Island. So yeah, we're all in that little spot there. Okay, so that is a website that you can, it's in the reference section at the end of this PowerPoint. So you can join that, you can go into that reference, into that website as much as you like and get as much stats as you want. I also thought this might be interesting in terms of going on in terms of overdose in BC during COVID-19. So this is from the British Columbia
wait, I'm just omitting that person. British Columbia Center for Disease Control. So this is where this comes from. So overdose events in 2020, 17,159, compared with 13,486 in 2019. So the idea is that that COVID has affected adversely substance use in British Columbia. 1,724 people died from overdose in 2020, compared with 985 in 2019. So it's COVID has not been good for substance use. Yeah, and fentanyl and analogs were relevant in over 8 to 10 illicit drug toxicity deaths in 2020. The average age of death from overdose is 43. And in 2020, an estimated almost 70,000 potential years of life have been lost to overdose in BC. And so here is overdose prevention sites, which Kay is going to talk about. So in December 2020, 50,000 visits. In December 2019, 67,440. So COVID has even adversely affected the number of people who would go to injection sites to safely use their substance. Yeah, so yeah, which brings us to the next topic, which is information from Kay about harm reduction. So I'm going to, unless we have questions, are there any questions right now that we want to answer? Okay. So harm reduction section. This is the harm reduction section, and this was taken from the Canadian Institute for Substance Use Research, this quote here. So I just liked it, so I put it in, but we'll go to Kay's presentation. So take it away, Kay.
Yeah, so this is what I was talking to you about earlier when the technical problems were going on, was this idea of a spectrum of psychoactive substance use, as opposed to that black and white. Some people are not addicted and some are. That we see that there's this continuum of use that goes all the way from beneficial to disorders, and that, you know, most of us lie probably at this end of the continuum, the early end. But when we get into this problematic through to the disorders end of the spectrum, we're talking probably somewhere between 10 and 20% of the population. So the number gets smaller and smaller the further you go along that continuum. So that the vast majority of substance use in BC is either beneficial or non-problematic. We're talking about very much the minority when we talk about substance use disorders and problems. You going to click for me, Susan?
Oh, yes. And I think Kate, you had a great quote from you one day. 75% of people who abuse substance stop abusing their substance without any help whatsoever, not going to the doctor, not using services whatsoever, just deciding they were using too much substance and stopping on their own. 20% use all the services that are provided, and 5% are the chronic people.
Yeah. Thanks, Susan. Just going back a little bit in time, again, just to give some context, we started off with great intentions in the addictions field back a few decades. And traditionally, the way that we viewed addiction was that it was based on a belief that abstinence was the only true path of recovery for people who were substance dependent. That the motivation that people needed in order to change was that they had to hit bottom. In other words, they had to experience some pretty severe negative consequences before the motivation to change would kick in. And there was also the belief that as counselors, as people that worked in this field, that we would be enabling people to continue their addictive behaviors if we didn't sort of call them on it and say they had to stop. In other words, prescribe to them what they needed to do in order to get better. So that's kind of where we started out. And it sounds terrible now when I say it, but that really did underlie a lot of the work that we did in the early days. So if you could click for me, Susan, that would be great. The way that we set it up, the way that our funding happened actually was that we were able to provide services to people as long as they committed to abstinence. And committing to abstinence meant that you were supposed to stop your substance use altogether once you, in order to qualify to even get in for treatment. So we wanted our job to be pretty easy. We wanted people to be already stopped before we would start seeing them. Sounds so arrogant now when I say it, but somehow at the time we believed that was the best thing we could do for people. We didn't think that moderation was an achievable goal for someone with an addiction. We believed that in order for people to really recover, they had to abstain altogether, and not just from their substance of choice, but from all substances. That made it very difficult for a lot of people, to get on board and to stay on board with a change like this. It meant trying to get people to make massive change with very little support. Okay, click, Susan. Did it change? Oh, there we go. Okay. The problems that we had with traditional treatment was that we had high rates of relapse. People, I think it was like 80+% of people would relapse in these traditional programs. A lot of people would start treatment, they would stop and go back out and use for a while, come back into treatment, and they would be kind of on this kind of vicious cycle that was really bad for their health and for their, for that sense of hope to be able to make change. It made all that very, very difficult. At that time, we saw relapse as a problem, as a failure, rather than just part of the process. And we also started to lose people. People started to die in greater and greater numbers, just because the kind of support that they needed early on in that process of change wasn't there. So as we went forward, we started to learn from some of our mistakes, and we started to listen to some of the things that our clients were telling us about what was working and what wasn't. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say that I think that the thing that has been most transformational in the addictions field in the last 20 to 30 years has been the voice of the drug user, the voice of the person with the addiction, listening to those voices and responding and starting to adjust and make changes based on what we were hearing, what feedback we were getting, was probably the most transformational element as we started to evolve a more effective approach to working with people with substance use problems. And how we sum that up in our way of talking about addiction is we use the term harm reduction. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit now. This is a diagram. Oh, go back, Susan. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So this diagram shows a little bit of what lies behind the term harm reduction. The idea that we respect the people that we're working with, they respect us, that we collaborate together. We are compassionate towards each other. We accept the realities that we come to the table with, and that through that process, what we want to do is we want to empower people to find a way to make the changes in their life that they want to make successfully. So that was where we started to evolve to over the decades that practice evolved through the last 20 years. So harm reduction then, based on this organization called Recovery Allies, what it says is that we accept for better or worse that licit and illicit drug use is part of our world, And we work to minimize the harmful effects of it rather than simply ignore or condemn them. So we're looking at the effects more than we are the actual use. And we begin to understand drug use as complex, as multifaceted, and that it is something that maybe we don't understand completely, but that we acknowledge it. We know that there are some ways of using drugs that are safer than others, and some ways of using drugs that are more harmful. The slide that you have in front of you now, I thought this was really interesting. This shows the relative harms to both users and to others of various substances. So you can just kind of have a look at that, glance across that as I'm talking here. So the other thing that we want to do with a harm reduction lens is we want to establish, we want to keep in mind the quality of individual and community life and well-being, rather than specifically the cessation of drug use itself. That is the criteria for a successful intervention, is improved well-being in the individual and the community. It calls for a non-coercive, non-judgmental provision of services and resources to people who use drugs and their communities to reduce the harm. And it ensures that drug users themselves have a voice in the creation of programs and policies that are designed to help them. And I like this slide because I think it shows, it visually shows us the idea of affirming drug users themselves as the primary agents of reducing the harms of their drug use in collaboration with the people that support them, and that it seeks to empower users to share information and to support each other in strategies that meet their actual conditions of use. And I think the most amazing organization that I know of that does that kind of work is VANDU, which is the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users. They really have made an enormous difference on the downtown east side to the day-to-day lives of drug users in that community. And the other part of harm reduction is the acknowledgement and the recognition of the realities of poverty, of racism, of social isolation and past trauma. I think I saw a thing on Facebook a little while ago that really spoke to this, that showed that we've been also shocked and horrified by the reports of how many Indigenous children died in residential schools. And someone put on Facebook a little while ago something about, you know, remember that some of the people that went to residential schools and that were affected by them survived. And those survivors are on the downtown east side now. And so, you know, let's show and demonstrate our compassion, not just for those that died, but for those that lived through and survived those conditions. Yeah, so we'll move on to the next slide, Susan.
Please flip to the next slide. It's Laurie. There's a question in the chat from Nancy McPhee.
Okay, great.
Can behavior be addictive? And Nancy, I'll unmute you in case you want to elaborate.
Nancy, that is an awesome question and a really good point. We know now that lots of other things besides substances can be addictive. And probably a lot of you can think of some things as we're talking about this right now. But we've heard a lot of conversations going on about kids and screen use, you know, and is there an addictive element to that? You know, a lot of us talk about our shopping addictions or our eating addictions. So there are all kinds of things that people can get into trouble with in terms of, you know, a habit that develops into an addictive behavior that then causes a negative consequences in that person's life. Probably most of us, if not all of us, have some experience with that in some aspect of our lives. So
I'm wondering too about something like anxiety. You know, like always needing to keep yourself, you know, that rush that you get when you're anxious and And I know a little bit about how your body kind of fuels that, but
Yeah.
like always needing to keep yourself alert for some reason. I mean, would that be considered an addictive behavior?
Well, do you know who Gabor Mate is? Have you ever heard of
Yeah.
him? Yeah,
Yeah.
so he would say yes. He would say you're addicted to your own adrenaline.
That's exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
And again, many of us have some personal experience with that. You know?
yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So
So
the-
is the recovery or I guess I'll find out later, but I'm wondering is the way of dealing with that in yourself, you follow a similar process? Is it I think the game that we didn't play about
pages
I
of
can't
change.
remember the words, reflecting and kind of looking at yourself, and it's more like a personal growth process. Would that be considered?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are lots of different ways to, you know, to come to terms with a personal habit like that. And you know, I know for me, when, for example, when I was a young woman, I was in my early 20s when my dad decided to go to AA. And a spinoff of that for me was that a few months later, I used the principles of AA to quit smoking. You know,
Right.
or and I've used those same kinds of skills and practices that I developed then to deal with other issues in my life.
Right.
So yeah, I think this is one route, but there are probably many others as well.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, coming back to the point that Susan made right away at the beginning of the presentation, the point about connection. We are social beings, and we do better, we thrive better in situations where we're connected in significant ways to others.
Right.
And that certainly has, I've seen that over and over again in my career, where people have a sense of belonging, where they know that they matter to other people, and they have the support that they need. They know that it makes a difference what they
Yeah.
do. That can be a strong transformational element in people's lives.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Yeah, I've seen it as well.
Yeah. So the photo in front of us here, you see a picture with a saying on it that is nothing about us without us. And that is I mentioned to you earlier, the Van Du organization of the drug users that organized themselves and began to work together to get their needs met. And this is one of their slogans or sayings, and I really like it. I think it's a really important one to keep in mind. I just want to talk a little bit about the benefits of harm reduction. And what I want to say about that is that even if someone can't immediately reach their goal, like say somebody wants to stop using altogether, but they're still chipping away, or they're maybe using one substance but not another, everybody in that circumstance can begin to take steps towards their goal. People who are given choices about their substance use goals actually have a higher likelihood of achieving abstinence than people who have abstinence prescribed from the beginning. So that's a little bit counterintuitive, but we've seen it over and over again in research and in practice. Choice, connection, those things help people move forward much more effectively than if I just say to someone, you're an addict and you need to stop. So, so this is one of the ways that we're evolving and changing in the field. So we have a lot of different kinds of harm reduction programs that have kind of developed over a number of decades. And I just thought I'd give you some examples. Just some of you will recognize some of them perhaps. The photo that you're looking at right now is from a place called Insight on the Vancouver downtown east side. And this is a safe injection site. This is a place where people who inject drugs can go. They can get clean supplies. They can get their, privacy, cleanliness, and medical support. And I think one of the most amazing things about Insight is that in the history of the organization, I think it began in around 2003, there's never been a death yet, an overdose death yet at Insight. People that go there to inject their drugs, even if they do go down, They have always been, because medical personnel are present, they've always been given the care that they need to be revived and to live through that overdose. So Insight has been an incredibly important and effective harm reduction program. Unfortunately, we don't have safe injection sites in every community, but that would sure be great if we could get to that point. A more traditional type of harm reduction program would be needle exchange programs. That's when people who are injecting drugs can bring in their old needles and exchange them for new ones, clean ones. That concept has, has developed even further in some places where people aren't even required to bring in their old needles to get new ones. So there's variations on those themes. Methadone maintenance programs have been around for a long, long time. There's research on methadone maintenance programs overwhelmingly indicates that that is a very effective harm reduction measure. Keeps people alive, helps them stabilize in their lives, and for many move into a more regular lifestyle where they're working and contributing to the community. And then more recently, I don't know how many of you have heard of this, but there are now few and far between, but a couple of pilot programs where people are given a prescription for their drug of choice and are able to access clean, safe supplies of that drug. This has become so much more important in the last 3 or 4 years with the opioid crisis and then with the advent of COVID. So just to say a little bit more about harm reduction and its philosophy, this is some information that I got from a man by the name of Mark Hayden. Mark has been doing harm reduction presentations to communities all over British Columbia now since the 1990s. So he's done a tremendous amount of work in this field. And he talks about principles like pragmatism, where drug use, we just have to recognize that it has occurred throughout human history and that we want to adopt, and we find it's more effective to adopt a non-judgmental approach that respects people's dignity and rights, that we focus on the consequences of drug use rather than the drug use itself, and that we balance the costs and benefits to both individual and society. And we look at setting realistic short-term goals to help people stabilize and get out of danger in their lives. The thing that, kind of the bottom line in the addictions field is, if someone dies, there's nothing more that you can do. So we try to keep people alive so that, at some point in their life, they can make a choice, make a different choice, and reclaim some health and quality of life. This is strange, Susan. I can see my new slides, but my old one is still there. Oh, okay. So, this slide talks a little bit about people who think harm reduction is great versus people who don't. So people that don't like the idea of harm reduction would be fearful that it would just enable people to continue to use, that it would actually have the effect of increasing drug use, that it sends a bad message to our children that drug use is okay somehow. It creates social disturbances and unrest, attracts undesirables. It doesn't work, and it's a waste of taxpayers' money. For people who do see harm reduction as a good strategy, usually they're people who have an understanding of the social determinants of health, that we have we see that these kinds of things, these social elements affect addiction and rates of addiction probably more than anything else, much more than genetic factors, for example. That when you empower people who use drugs, they are able to improve their health outcomes, and they are able then to move past whatever kind of stigmatization they're experiencing. That under a harm reduction umbrella, we're able to provide culturally appropriate services to people who use drugs, and that harm reduction saves money and saves lives. And that is borne out over and over again in the evidence, in the research. The evidence is strong. Are we having trouble with the slides, Susan, or?
I've just moved it to the evidence for harm reduction slide.
What I'm still seeing is those for and against. Oops, looks like we lost it again. So I'm just gonna finish up here because I know we're gonna run out of time. I don't know what happened to our slides, but the couple of more things that I wanted to say. One was that we had recently, I don't know if you saw this in the news on October the 21st, but Dr. Patricia Daly, who is a medical person, one of the people in Vancouver, she talked a little bit about the opioid crisis that we have right now. And she said, that she feels strongly that we need to have a safe supply of heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine available, that's the only thing that will stop the overdose death toll. There she is there. She says, we haven't done the most basic thing to address this crisis. And she likes a Compassion Club model, which would provide tested heroin, cocaine, and meth to users. And this is because tainted street drugs continue to kill around 6 people a day in British Columbia. And that's compared to about 3.7 deaths per day due to COVID overall over the last 20 months or so. So the overdose crisis is still killing more people than COVID. And COVID, as we saw from what Susan told us, COVID is making that worse rather than better. So this is one of the cries, the kind of harm reduction cries that we're hearing from many professionals now. And the Vancouver City Council is now working to try and decriminalize substance use in Vancouver so that safe supplies can be established for people who need them. So I just, in conclusion, I just want to say that harm reduction does work. And if you look at research, you'll see over and over again that it proves itself out. We see reduced negative health outcomes for people who use drugs, reduced criminal activity, improved public order, reduced cost to the healthcare system. And that is borne out in other parts of the world as well, Portugal being a wonderful example of that. So I think that's all I wanted to say today, Susan, about harm reduction.
Okay, thank you. That's lovely. I wonder if there's any questions for Kay? Okay, none at this point. Okay, so we'll carry on. So the rest of our presentation is based upon this harm reduction model. So definitely there are substance abusers who choose abstinence, and it is a very big topic of lots of discussion and sometimes contention in terms of harm reduction and abstinence within the addictions field. But any program that I've been part of has been with the premise of harm reduction. And I imagine also with you, Laurie, and well.
Yes, yeah. I do remember the history that Kay was referring to in practice. Kay, I can remember in the early 2000s, for example, we would ask people not only to be abstinent, but to show up for 6 meetings prior to making them, if you like, eligible, what a horrible word, for treatment services. And so it's a really good example to illustrate just how far we've come from that kind of archaic, inflexible stance to understanding the whole person.
Yes, I agree with that. And I remember a woman who was addicted to benzodiazepines, who Laurie and I worked with together. And we, as the system kind of forced upon her abstinence, it was the most harmful thing ever, actually. to force her to become abstinent from her benzodiazepine addiction. So it would have been so much more compassionate if we had gone with the harm reduction model for her. Yeah. Okay, so now how do you deal with this? What do you do? What are some ways to help change become permanent, become and have success with those changes? So one of the tools that I use all the time in my therapy with people, and I'm sure Laurie and Kay do as well, is the stages of change. And the stages of change was developed by Prochaska and DiClemente. They at first studied hundreds of smokers, and they wanted to know what made somebody go from us being a smoker to a non-smoker. And what they learned was that every single person goes through these stages of change that are here, which we'll go through in a bit more detail. And it was a very kind of linear process. If they relapsed, so to speak, they went to go back to one of these stages and start again. And it was when people had a foundation in each of these stages of change that when they got to the action stage and the maintenance stage, they were successful. So that's where this stages of change come from. That was in the 1990s that they developed that. It's used in every single substance program that you can imagine. And I use it with anything, because everybody goes through these stages of change when they're trying to make change. So as we're going through this, if you could all just take a moment and just think of something that you want to change in your life right now. Don't make it the hardest thing you want to change. Just make it something simple for this presentation, just to get the idea. We'll all go through it together. And so as you're listening to these different stages of change, think about which stage of change you're in terms of that thing that you want to change. And so just to give you an example, Laurie and Kay, do you have things that you want to change that we could kind of use as examples as we're going through this?
Oh, gosh. Go ahead, put me on the spot.
Something that, well, as you're thinking, Laurie, so something that I always, whenever I'm doing this with people, I think a lot about, I'm horribly addicted to sugar. I always think about changing that behavior of sugar.
That was the one I would say too, Susan. That's an ongoing one for me.
Yes. Yeah.
I will say I tend to workaholism. And even on my days off, like I set myself up yesterday for these things that I had to do, and I ended up with a raging headache, raging.
Yes. Yeah. And so there's 3 examples that it doesn't necessarily have to be a substance that you're wanting to change. So something in your life that you're wanting to change, it can be exercise, it can be eating healthily, whatever it is for you that you would like to change. Just think about it in terms of this presentation. So we've got all these different stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, which has ambivalence within it, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. So we all start our change process at the pre-contemplation stage. So we'll go to that slide here. So is where you say, problem, what problem? That's Jim Smith down the street. He's the one that's got the problem. Talk to him. Don't talk to me. I don't have a problem. I don't need to change anything. So with my sugar addiction, I go through that all the time. I even though I have done this many times, I've kind of decided I am harm reduction with my sugar. I have to recycle through all of these stages of change all the time. Laurie and Kay, anything you want to add to the pre-contemplation stage?
I think for me, I'll speak for myself. I can very easily justify my behavior.
Yeah.
Take
Yep.
you on any day on rationalizations, Laurie. I think I'm
Yeah.
And so sometimes in pre-contemplation, what you're going to be experiencing is anxiety. You're going to be fearful, angry, resistant, curious, frustrated, embarrassed. Those are the kind of emotions that you might feel. And you're unaware that you have a problem, but your friends are going to tell you that you have a problem. Yeah. Okay, so that's the pre-contemplation stage. Then we go into the contemplation stage. And the printer is printing right now. So the contemplation stage is marked by being chaotic and ambivalent. And so this is like internal chaos. Your mind is kind of going a little bit crazy and you're like, but I want to change, but I don't want to change, but I want to change, but I don't want to change. Somebody once described it to me as like their thoughts were all jumbled up and they couldn't make sense of any of their thoughts. And it looked like a whole big tangle of string was how they described it. And it is marked by ambivalence, which is sitting on the fence. So you can see the benefits of staying the same and you can see the benefits of moving on. And you're stuck on the fence. You don't know which way to go. It's like 50-50. Yeah. Anything you want to add, Kay and Laurie?
Well, it's also characterized, to reference Nancy's point, like if I consider the alternative, I get quite anxious. Like, who's going to do all my stuff?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Because you're giving up on something that you actually kind of like. There's things that are good, that you're, yeah.
The only other thing I would say, Susan, is that, I can start off the day, absolutely clear on what it is I want to do, what I'm going to eat, and that doesn't include any sugar. And by the end of the day, I don't give a shit anymore. I just want the sugar and that's what I have, so we can experience that shift within ourselves over a period of hours as well.
Yeah, way of saying it. So once again, in this stage, you're going to be feeling anxious, fearful, apprehensive, curious, maybe relieved because you're seeing that you are sitting on the fence. There'll be confusion, there'll be pain, there might be excitement, might be loss of self-esteem, and then which all is characterized by ambivalence or sitting on the fence. Okay, then we move to the next stage, which is preparation, which is where you've kind of decided, well, yeah, I do have a problem. I can see all the benefits of moving beyond that problem. I'm going to start making a plan. I'm going to get ready to make the change. I'm not making the change yet, but I'm getting ready to make the change. So for me, with my sugar, this often is about buying certain things at the store so that I have something that is considered to be a treat, even though I'm not going to be eating sugar for a while. It might also is about telling my husband that I'm not interested in, like, please don't bring sugar into the house for this month because I have too much temptation, that kind of thing. Anything else, Kay and Laurie?
I think if I were to consider it, I think preparation is moving into acknowledgement.
Yes, that's a great way to say it. And it's also bringing your making a plan with the people who are going to support you. So if if you need your doctor to help you, for example, you're going to get your doctor to get on board with you. I've met people who have kind of they would doctor shop and they would go from doctor to doctor and get substance from their substance from lots of different doctors. And so then they made a plan with the doctor where the only person they could get that substance from was that particular doctor. So that's the kind of thing that happens in preparation. You haven't changed, but you're preparing to be successful with the change. I think this is a very important stage. Yeah. Okay. And then we go to the action stage, which is where, particularly when you're a loved one of someone who uses substance, you want your person to be at this stage right away. And it's very hard to kind of acknowledge that all those other stages are actually as equally as important as the action stage in terms of being successful. In stages, you're doing it, you're making the change, and you're carrying on with doing it. So that would be, in my instance, that would be, I've stopped eating the sugar, that's that. With Laurie, what would that look like for the action stage for you, for workaholism?
I think it would be taking charge of my scheduling on a daily basis. Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, perfect. Yeah. So it's
Like,
these,
similar to
so
you
there would be
guys.
an action stage for everybody with whatever you.
Mhm.
Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. Must be a very unstable connection. Yeah, I'm back. Yeah. So yeah, action stage. So people, loved ones want your people to be in the action stage right away, but it always takes a bit of a process to get there. And it's so lovely when people are in the action stage, because there's so much hope and so much positivity, right? But also it's hard because all of that stuff that got stuffed down when you were using your substance or doing the behavior that you were doing kind of starts to come out, and it kind of hits you in the face, sort of these coping mechanisms that you've had to deal with whatever the unhealthy behavior or substance is. And then we go to the maintenance stage. And so after a period of 6 months or so, this is where you're saying to yourself, I'm still doing it. And you can say to your friends and your family, I'm still doing it. This is where I fall down all the time in my sugar. I can go through the action stage and maybe maintain for a month or two after I actively do my change of stopping sugar. And then I just fall right back into relapse. So, and here's relapse. Relapse is a bummer, but relapse is also very important. It happens for everybody. It happens in any of those stages. It can happen at any point. You can have relapse. And I think they say that people relapse an average of 7 times, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's more the norm than the exception when people relapse. And once again, if you're a loved one, it's very hard to watch your loved ones go through relapse. But what you want to do is you want to use the relapse process as education for yourself. What do you need in order to make yourself be successful the next time? This is where, yeah, I'm not so good with, this is where I practice harm reduction with my sugar. Because I do relapse. Yeah. Anything you want to add, Kay or Laurie?
I use the stages of change in my clinical practice when I am working with someone trying to beat an addictive behavior. I use it all the time. The reason I like it is that on the face of it, thank you for putting up that slide. On the face of it, it looks very simple. And in a way it is. I mean, it's 6 stages. And so for a client that is going through the really hard work of addressing a behavior that's not serving them well, this gives them a mental model that they can really grasp quickly. And then I think it's up to us as the clinicians to understand the work that is to be done at each of those 6 stages. So we have access to the worker tasks that are affiliated with each of the stages, and that helps us focus in our work that we're doing with people as well. One of my comments about the model as it was first presented with Susan's lecture is that it looks like it's very proportional model. It's like you have a pie and you divide it into 6. And I think that for clients that can be misleading because it looks like each of the stages is going to take about the same time. And in that regard, it's very misleading because you can be in pre-contemplation for years upon years.
True, so true.
And that's difficult for people. And so when you're working with someone, you know, and they have made some significant changes that they feel satisfied with, and they look at you with their hands on their hip and say, how long do I have to do this maintenance thing for?
Uh-huh.
And sometimes the best answer is it's for the rest of your life, actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I do find the people that I've been working with over the past couple of years really adhere and align with this mental model, which is why I continue to use it. There's also a story that I share with some clients if it's appropriate, because it can come off as a horror story as well. And that's the story of Philip Seymour Hoffman, who had a problematic relationship with his heroin use. He was addicted to heroin, and he was able to move through these stages, and he lived in maintenance for years and years and years. He was happily married. He had 3 wonderful small children, and after 23 years of maintenance, he relapsed once, and it was a fatal relapse. I share that story if I feel, you know, that it's information that would be helpful to the person I'm working with. But it also illustrates that this man, you know, that's 2.5 decades of a person able to manage a behavior that wasn't serving them well. And it also highlights that relapse is a little buzzard that sits right there, right there.
Yep.
So
People need to be vigilant with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that relapse could happen at any time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Lethal relapses in some instances.
Yeah.
Mhm. So yeah, I am a user of this model still.
Me too. I'm a user of it all the time. With pretty much every single person who I work with, I use this model all the time. So in terms of yourselves, where would you put yourself? Think about the thing that you thought about at the beginning, what you want to change, and where would you put yourself? Having heard a little bit about all of the 6 stages, are you in pre-contemplation, contemplation? So pre-contemplation is problem, what problem? That's Jim Smith down the street. Contemplation is sitting on the fence. I'm ambivalent. I don't know which way to go. Preparation is you're making a plan. Action is you're doing it. You're moving forward. Maintenance is you've been doing it for a while and you're maintaining that change. And relapse is you've gone back to the beginning. So because everybody's muted, we can't know what where everybody's at. So in terms of me and with my sugar, I would say at the moment I'm in preparation for the sugar. What about you, Laurie? Where would you be?
Sorry, I muted. I would have to say I'm still contemplative.
Okay, so you're kind of sitting on the fence trying to figure out which way to go.
Yeah, justifying. I can take some relief for my headache, and I got things to do.
Yep, great. Okay, where are you at?
Well, I think, Susan, this is an ongoing issue for me. It has been for decades now. So I cycle through these various stages of change. But currently, at this point, I would say I'm in action.
Okay, lovely, wonderful. Yeah, and I would also just like to say that when I'm actively working with people with substance use issues or any kind of issue, really, I like to once a year go make some kind of behavioral change and go stages of change, because I think it's really important to know what it's like to stop and to change something. And because the other thing to think about in terms of substance is it's very, very, very hard to stop using a substance. the physical body sensations that people feel when they are withdrawing off of whatever substance it is that they use strong, that people avoid that, for years. They can avoid it for years, those physical body sensations of the withdrawal process. And so you want to have a little bit of empathy for people who that's what they're going through when they make a change.
And I think we could safely say that with our students, that is always the experience that comes out of a change, an assignment on change, is they will almost always say, oh my God, I had no idea how hard it must be. I had this terrible struggle over coffee. What must it be like to be addicted to something like alcohol or heroin? So that experience of empathy, I think, is really important.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. Yeah. And there's always this kind of chaotic kind of like stage where it feels so really, really hard to make the change. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully by now you've all decided where you're at with this. And once again, hopefully you're seeing that there's no right or wrong wherever you're at. The most important is that you build a strong foundation. So that's in each stage. That's one of the most important things. And then the next stage, and that next thing is you want to investigate. Always investigate, learn more and more and more about your substance, about your behavior, about whatever it is, so that you're going to be successful with each stage that you go through. You want to resolve any ambivalence. So that's the sitting on the fence. It feels good to stay the same. It feels good to move on. I don't know which way to go. That ambivalence always feels internally very chaotic and very kind of like string tangled up. And make a solid plan and always do small steps. So this is how you're going to be successful with change. And there are some other tools that we use to manage that. So we're going to, with your change that you kind of decided for today, the first step, if you've got ambivalence or you're sitting on the fence, is you want to look at what are the positives. Make a quadrant like this on a piece of paper. Write down in the top left quadrant the positives of staying the same, and then top right quadrant the negatives of staying the same, the positives of moving on, and the negatives of moving on. So as Laurie and Kay and I are talking, do it for yourself as well. What are the positives of staying the same? It's really important when we have ambivalence, when we're sitting on the fence, that we acknowledge that actually there's some positives to this behavior that we have. If we don't acknowledge those positives, we're not gonna move on. We're gonna find it really hard to move on. So we do want to acknowledge all the positives that are there. So putting Laurie and Kay on the spot here, but do you have positives of staying the same?
I certainly do, Susan. For me, with the sugar, sugar is a great drug for me. When I have sugar, it makes me feel less tired. It takes away a good deal of pain if I'm having physical pain. It comforts me. I feel comforted by it. So there are a lot of things about sugar consumption that are positive for me. They're certainly overshadowed by the health issues that it causes, especially when you get to my age and stage of life. But there's, there are definitely those pros and cons are there all the time.
Yeah, lovely. And Laurie?
The pros for staying in my workaholic state of mind is I said I get shit done. There's some kind of satisfaction and there's a buzz that you get from it. And then when I really thought deeply, and this is where I need a therapist, so talk to me later, Susan, it has to do with my self-worth.
Beautiful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So now as a clinician, I'd be listening to what Kay and Laurie are saying, and I would start to kind of tease out what they're saying about how they think they could make the change, or where they think they could go. So that will help them to kind of move on, right? The idea is that there's going to be positives in all 4 quadrants, and we want to acknowledge the positives and the negatives in all 4 quadrants, positives and negatives in all 4 quadrants, so that we can find the change talk and move beyond the ambivalence, move beyond sitting on the fence is what we're looking for. So all of you who we're going to go through how to find the change talk and how to identify the change talk, how to identify the parts that say I'm ready to move on, and kind of make those stronger, the I'm ready to move on part, if that's what you want to do. Sometimes what happens is when you have a behavior or a substance that you want to change, use that you want to change, you find out that you're not ready to make that change, and something else has to happen first in order to be successful. And so that is part of what happens as well, is that we have to kind of narrow down and make sure that the change that you want to make is actually doable for you.
Mhm.
Yeah, sometimes people it's very clear that they have substance use issues, and they come in, but they don't want to talk about the substance use issue at all. They want to talk about the fact that their marriage is not working well, or they just got fired from their job. And why did they get fired from their job? Something like that. And so we'll talk about that first. We'll meet the person where they're at, which is like what Kay was talking about in terms of harm reduction. Anything else to say there, Kay and Laurie?
I just thought that's exactly it, Susan. And so when I was listening to Kay, you could hear change talk, because what I heard Kay say is it's not the sugar per se, it's her health. So I would, as a clinician, say it sounds to me, Kay, like your health is really important to you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that I would experience that as a validating statement. That would be congruent with how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so it illustrates, like, that is the work of the clinician, like, is to really listen, and then that's where the work is.
That's right. And if you're not a clinician listening in here, just also think that this is, the idea would be to help you to figure out how to identify the change talk, but know that if you're a loved one of someone who's using substance or whatever behavior it is, the person might not want to hear it from you.
Yeah.
They're going to be probably more interested or likely to hear it from a professional, or from someone who's not so involved in the whole process. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. So, and so that's resolving the ambivalence. The next step is to make the plan. So, Laurie and Kay, if you were to make a plan, if you were in preparation stage for this, what would your plan look like?
Well, Susan, I can talk from my experience. What I had to do with my sugar issue is I had to do a combination of abstinence and harm reduction strategies to make it work for me. So what I did, this was a few years back, was I decided that the things that were off limit for me were any kind of food that had no nutritionally redeeming factors whatsoever. So jujubes, licorice, candy that was just purely sugar was off limits for me. But if I was, looking at eating something that maybe had sugar in it, but had other, nutritional things as well, then that was an option that I could choose to have or not have, as the case may be. So the abstinence was from sugar only, and the harm reduction was, allowing myself some leeway or some creative license to be able to manage the desire or the cravings that I had for sugar.
Lovely, wonderful. And Laurie?
I think if I were to get a handle on my schedule, I would probably consider putting a cap on the things I do in a day. So instead of setting my to-do list at say 7 or 8 or more things with a harm reduction mindset, to start maybe with 5, with the goal at some point maybe to move to 3, something like that.
Lovely. And as I said, I would use harm reduction as well. So all the principles that Kay was talking about in terms of basically reducing the harms associated with the behavior or the substance are a way to go. Because abstinence is hard, and abstinence is also not necessarily what is required, right? To take a break from sugar helps my body quite a lot. And I'm reducing the harms as I go along when I take this break and kind of think about it and that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully you're all making a plan, some kind of an idea. Yeah, a little weird that we can't hear your plans, but hopefully, if you have questions about them, put them in the chat box. And then the next stage is the action stage. That's where you stopped your sugar, you stopped the workaholism, and you're doing the behavior, the new behavior. So ready, set, action. Do we need to say anything more about the action stage?
I think that I would like people, if they're applying this model to something that they want to change, that it's hard work. And, and I think that helps us be more empathic to other people trying to change as well. And so it's like every damn day. That's what it's like.
Yeah, that's a great, one day at a time. Sometimes it's 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. Yeah. I've met people who've had to write down every single minute of the day what they're doing. It's their way to get through the action stage.
I think the other
They
key
went
point is
to
that small steps. Making sure that
Small
you
steps.
acknowledge to yourself the small steps forward that you're making.
Yep, that's right. Small steps. And if the steps are not working, then the steps are not big, they're not small enough. So then you have to go back and make the steps smaller. Yeah. Okay, so that is stages of change. So once again, just to recap, you want to build a strong foundation in each stage of change. You want to investigate what it is you're changing. You want to resolve any kind of ambivalence that you experience, the sitting on the fence. You want to resolve that. You want to figure out how to move beyond. You want to create a solid plan that involves small steps. So these are and if you get stuck in any of these stages, that's a good time to come to a professional. Yeah, we can help you through that. Using the next set of skills that we're talking about. So are there any questions in this stage section, Laurie? Okay. Okay. So just quickly, we're going to go through relapse justification. So people can, relapse is actually a process, and it starts way long before you actually go back to the old behavior or use the substance. It can start even months or even a year before. And it has to do with you progressively use logic and rationalization to justify using your substance or doing your behavior again. I don't have it, just one drink is not gonna matter to me. If I drink one drink, the world's not gonna end, that kind of thing. And you start to go down a bit of a slippery slope. And yeah, thoughts? And then you have secrecy. So if you start to hide what you're doing, that's a sign that relapse, defying your relapse. Any thoughts or anything?
I have a kind of an embarrassing anecdote that kind of illustrates this. One of my strategies for managing sugar is to not have it in the house. And if it is in the house, I ask my roommate to hide it for me. It adds that extra barrier that makes it so that I don't go that next step. So last night he had some candy popcorn and he put it in the cupboard downstairs in the kitchen. I opened the cupboard and saw the candy popcorn. And as soon as I get that visual cue, then that's all I'm thinking about. So I had to take the bag to him and say, can you please put this somewhere where I'm not going to find it or see it? Because it's a trigger for me. And once I start thinking about it, it's hard for me to stop.
Yes.
So it's, yeah, that, or I might, I could imagine myself taking a couple of handfuls out of the bag in secret before I give it back to him. That's just how the brain works when that addictive element is present.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm the same, but I would have probably taken a handful. So there you go. Yeah. Relapse happens all the time. It's the norm more than the exception that relapse happens. And so these are the stages of relapse. You're in balance, and then an event happens, a trigger event. So like the candy popcorn from Kay, and boom, that's that. You get this internal destabilization, which is kind of like anxiety and not feeling good, that kind of thing, which also then leads to external destabilization, which is the bag of candy in the popcorn in the cupboard, as an example. And then you have the relapse justification, which tends you towards the addiction again. And then you have to start all over again. Anything to add to that?
I think what I've encountered in practice is that when you're debriefing, if I could use that term, a relapse with someone you're working with, there's a lot of teaching that has to happen with relapse as well, because people will tell you that they relapsed on number 4. They relapsed when they used.
Mm-hmm.
And so the work is, well, what went on before you bought dope? What went on before you went to the liquor store? What happened before you ate all that sugar popcorn? Because you have to dial it back to figure out the destabilization, not the use.
Yep. That's a great point. That it always, people think they relapsed in the moment, but it's the behaviors that happened long before, or the destabilization, whatever it was. Yeah, the internal thoughts that are going on. Yeah.
In many ways, I think relapse is the best tool we have for learning what it is that we need to do to change our behavior.
Yeah.
It's a concrete, and it's risky. And I think your example, Laurie, was a good one where, for some people, relapse brings along with it the very real possibility of losing your life. That's a little different than when we're talking about candy popcorn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a range of the level of risk that's involved in relapse, depending on what your problem behavior is.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree 100%. And if you can use it and not beat yourself up because you've relapsed, and use it as an education and a way to figure out what exactly happened or what needs to happen that you're going to be successful the next time, then that's great. It does unfortunately come with this kind of shame that happens. People feel ashamed that they relapsed and that kind of thing. So just something to think about as a loved one, that you want to not contribute to the shame that the people feel. Because I can tell you, having worked with hundreds and maybe even thousands of people with substance use issues, that they do feel shame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not a happy place for them to be. They don't choose it. They don't want to be there. And I also I think something else to keep in mind is that nobody wants to become addicted. I don't think anybody starts using a substance with the idea that they're going to become addicted. So it is, based upon a lot of different things, how people get addicted, really.
Susan, we have a question on the board from Nancy.
Okay.
So she's asking, is it the trigger event that is key here?
Well, the trigger event, yes, and how you interact with the trigger event, how it makes you, how it stresses you out.
So it would have an impact on that internal destabilization. I'm just thinking, so I can't remember who actually said, but it's the stage of relapse is really the place where you can dig deeper and really learn about what caused me to relapse. And it isn't necessarily the bag of the popcorn. It goes back further than that. So I'm just thinking of to be able to reflect on what is it that's making me relapse. And I have to think it's not just because my roommate put the bag of popcorn in the cupboard where it was more likely that I'd find it, unless they put it in their cupboard, perhaps. So I'm just curious about when you reflect on your addictions. I mean, my thing would be, well, like, what was it that got me to be anxious or not to care or to procrastinate or whatever it is. I want to go back further, and I'm just wondering, are these two, the balance and the trigger event, kind of really important things to learn about? Is that?
I think it's an ongoing process, Nancy.
Okay.
I think the more that we understand about how our triggers work, what they are and how they work, the better chance we have of being able to be proactive,
Yeah.
and effectively respond to those. It's when, and I think the point you're getting at is really key here, which is that it's when we're unconscious, right? It's when we're unaware.
That's right. Yeah.
That we're most at risk, that we're most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so when Laurie says this is hard work, she's not kidding. It's hard work to stay awake and be aware, especially when you think about the amount of time that real change can take. It can take up to 2 years for the brain to change into, and to have a new schema that out of which you live. It's
Right.
not a quick and easy process.
Right.
But it's an incredibly rich journey, personal journey.
Right.
When you take it on, it's just not easy.
I have a young friend who's trying to quit smoking, and having quit smoking myself, I mean, I spent most of my life in relapse, but it's to try and figure out, well, what is it that just makes it so easy to.
If I could say something, Nancy and
Sure.
Susan and Kay, triggers are elusive because they can be tangible or intangible. And that's what Kay is talking about. So it could be a bad day at work. It could be a fight with your spouse. Those are very tangible things.
Yeah.
But like Kay references schema. A trigger could also be the story in your head.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I just want to make that point. Like, I think people understand triggers as something happened, but that isn't necessarily always true.
Right.
Yeah. So it's having, I think, awareness of what the tangible triggers are, but also what stories in your head.
Right.
What's the narrative, right? That
And yeah. Okay.
That's totally, absolutely correct. True, based upon my experience. And it can happen, the relapse can happen like a year after the trigger has happened. I've met people who've been triggered a year before, and it's taken that long to figure out what exactly the trigger was. And then they've gone into relapse. And hopefully, like, some people catch it very quickly and some people don't, and they are able to get back on track. But yeah.
Susan, we also have a question from Siobhan Tar. Siobhan, I'm going to open your mic so you can ask.
Yeah, I have heard this from a couple of loved ones. I know it's bad. I know it's hurting my relationships. I know it's holding me back, but I like it. And I'm just wondering, is that evidence of being in pre-contemplation? Or I just wonder what, I know it seems obvious, but what does it mean? What does it really mean?
Well, it would, you're totally right. It would be evidence of being in pre-contemplation, or maybe contemplation. You know, they haven't quite decided that there's something that they want to change, or that they're looking at, maybe there's something that they want to change. Yeah.
Or they're acknowledging or appeasing, they're acknowledging your distress and, you know,
Yeah.
attempting to
Yeah.
appease that distress.
Yeah. But there's also, when I hear it, I hear a deep affection for the addictive substance, a deep liking, a deep, yeah. And that's upsetting too, to hear that.
I think that's a really important part, because people do have deep affection. It's like it's their lover. You know, lots of people will say that their substance is their lover. They have a relationship with that substance, and you take that substance away, they've lost the most loved person, thing that loves them in their life. So they think, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
And habits of any kind that become addictive, they're meeting a need. And the person may not be able to identify what that need is, nor may the clinician. So I think it invites a period of intense exploration to really dig as deep as you can to say, what need is this meeting for you?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I, you know, an example of that is, I've met a few people who have managed to escape from the downtown east side, and they talk about how they went into the downtown east side for 3 hours and came out 3 years later. And because the connection that they experienced, the whole, you know, like feeling of belonging, their identity was all wrapped up in this, in their experiences in the downtown east side. You know, they had to wake up in the morning, they had to figure out how they were going to get their substance, they had to figure out where they were going to get it, they had to figure out how they were going to, you know, get the money to get the substance. You know, were they going to panhandle, were they going to steal, were they going to, so it took up their whole day, the whole process of getting their substance and using their substance. And in that whole time, they were talking with people, they were part of a community. And so, you know, it's hard for people to give that up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else to say? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so that's stages of change, hopefully, and relapse process. There's lots to say about all of that, but in terms of getting through this presentation, we better carry on. So we have the stages of change as a tool to use to help people to kind of get ready to make the change. Another tool that is used, and it works very well, there's lots of evidence that shows that it works very well, is motivational interviewing. So motivational interviewing is a collaborative, person-centered form of guiding to elicit and strengthen a person's motivation for change. And motivational interviewing was developed by Miller and Rolnick. There's, at the end of this slide presentation, the PowerPoint, which we can share with everybody, is a link to a great video of this motivational interviewing, because it's going to be very brief what we're doing here today. Anything you want to add to any of that, Laurie or Kay? Okay. So the first thing that you have to think about in terms of motivational interviewing is what is internal motivation and what is external motivation. So this slide is kind of talking about that. So a lot of times people get externally motivated by the court system that tells them if they don't get motivated and stop their substance or their behavior, they're going to lose their children, they're going to lose their job. They might get motivated by their employers telling them that they're going to lose their job. They might get motivated by their spouse who says, if you don't sort this problem out, you're going to lose the relationship. Sometimes I've heard people say that they've been externally motivated by their children who have told them they have to stop using substance. So those would be external motivators. And then we have internal motivators, which is where you internally decide, you make the change that you want to make this change internally. So the internal motivation is much more prone to having permanent lasting change than the external motivation. But there is evidence that shows that people who are externally motivated will be just as successful in making the change. And I remember a video that's posted online about a man who talked about he was externally motivated to stop his substance because he was going to lose his kids and he was going to lose his job and that kind of thing. And for 9 months, he didn't think of himself. He stopped his substance, but he did for 9 months. He did not think of himself as being abstinent from the substance. It wasn't until all of a sudden he made this click that he was doing it for himself, that it kind of clicked and made sense that he was internally motivated at that point. So motivational interviewing is a lot of that happens. Okay. So, 4 parts to motivational interviewing: collaboration, acceptance, evocation, and compassion. So these make up the spirit of motivational interviewing. So you want to be a collaborator with your person, which means that you're bringing both people's experience, expertise into the conversation. Instance is there's no judgment of the other person. You meet them where they're at. There's keen in understanding the person's internal frame of reference, like where are they coming from? What's making them tick? What's making them do what they do? And then you want evocation. So you're drawing out the wisdom from the client. You have what you need, and together we're going to find it. That's what evocation is. And then you use compassion, so empathy. So you're not trying to sell something. You're not trying to say, well, if you change, if you stop your substance, this, and this is going to happen. Your life is going to be so much better. Don't do that. Instead, you have empathy for where the person is at. Want to add anything? Okay. So once again, a major thing that motivational interviewing deals with is ambivalence. So ambivalence is this, we've been talking about it a lot. It's a normal part of the change process. It's that, like we said before, it's that sitting on the fence. I can see the reasons for staying the same, and I can see the reasons for moving on. It's simultaneously wanting something and not wanting something. Has very conflicting motivations. It's very uncomfortable. When people feel ambivalent, they feel very uncomfortable. Yeah. Anything else to add to that? I think maybe something else to add is that motivational interviewing is a lot about helping people move beyond the ambivalent stage. Finding the change talk that is going to help someone not sit on the fence so much anymore. Yeah. So motivational interviewing works because it elicits change talk from people and because it minimizes resistance. So So you want to have, there's 3 different styles. There's the writing reflex, which is a directive style. This is not what motivational interviewing is all about. There's engaging, guiding, and evoking, which is what motivational interviewing is about. So it's about this, you're the guide because you have skills and tools to help someone kind of move beyond all these different stages that are there in terms of making a change. But the person, the client, knows knows their life and knows what they want and what they need. Yeah. Okay. And then the other last style is the following style, which is meandering and has less focus. And so the meandering style is not really about motivational interviewing because it lacks the goal orientation and the direction of motivational interviewing. Where do we start? How do we do this? How does motivational interviewing start? Which is, you can have long courses on motivational interviewing. You can have, there's different levels of motivation, very kind of basics today. But where we start is using OARS. OARS stands for open-ended questions, affirming, reflecting, and summarizing. And so Laurie has agreed to be my client, and I'm going to demonstrate all these 4 different styles. So the first one, open-ended questions. These are not just for motivational interviewing. You're going to find them in any kind of counseling style. And the first one, it's harder to do than you think, which is about not using yes or no questions. It's about using open-ended questions, who, what, where, when, why, that are going to help someone talk more about their problem, whatever that is. So Laurie, shall we just go through them quickly, this first one?
Okay.
Okay. Hi, Laurie. How are you doing?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
Okay, you've frozen on my screen. Okay, good. Now I hear you. Okay, Laurie. So what brings you here? How can I help you today?
I would like to tackle a habit I've developed where I overfunction. I try and do too much. I'm getting headaches. I'm experiencing insomnia. And I've been trying for months and years to stop.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is, okay, so you're coming today because there's been something that's been bothering you for months and years, and it sounds like you think you overfunction. And so how can you tell me a little bit about when this started?
I would say it probably started soon after high school when I embarked on post-secondary ed. And if any, you've been to school, you very, very, very quickly figure out that post-secondary institutes are not high school. They're way more fun. And so I think I became engaged very quickly, and then it just escalated.
Okay, you became engaged very quickly in this whole process of over-functioning, and it sounds like it escalated very quickly. Was there any people that were involved, like, important people in your life at that time who were part of this whole process?
No. Also, I think for a lot of people, at least from my perspective, when you're a student, it's a very independent enterprise. Like, you just head down and go.
So what were you getting out of just heading down and going?
I just liked being in an academic setting, and then I was getting degrees.
Great. Okay, so we'll stop there. So we'll carry on with this as we go through it. So I asked 3 questions there. The first one was a open-ended question. Did everybody hear? The second was actually a yes/no question. And the third one was open-ended. And what was the experience like for you, Laurie?
I felt like you were leading me to dig deeper.
Okay. So it was kind of guiding.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so that's the open-ended questions. And now we go to affirming. So let's affirming is about noticing and commenting on people's strengths. So Laurie, this over functioning that you did, I'm imagining that, you probably had to be pretty resilient to be able to, maintain it.
I suppose I was resilient. Maybe I was determined. Maybe I was trying to summit a mountain that doesn't exist.
So you were trying to summit a mountain that doesn't exist. You were going somewhere that you thought was this elusive kind of place that you were going, that you kind of didn't quite know where it was. And you were, so once again, what I think about when I think about that is that takes a lot of strength to do something like that.
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. And it got you pretty far, hey? It got you to getting your PhD.
Yes. And I think, yeah, there's something, it's work ethic and workaholism. It's a very, very slim line in between the two, because I think in society, we value a work ethic. And then it's almost too late when it becomes workaholism. And the funny thing about getting a PhD was I didn't even go to the grad. It was like doing it was more fun than achieving it.
And so there's for you, for a work ethic, that sounds like a wonderful trait to have.
That makes me feel better. Thank you.
Okay. And then we're going to move to the next. Hopefully that gives people a bit of an idea of affirming. These are, once again, harder to do than you think. And then we go, Laurie, what I'm hearing you say is that having a work ethic, and you've mixed up having a work ethic with workaholic.
Yeah, I think at some point I crossed a line.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about crossing that line?
I think with my partner and maybe my kids, I began to project my workaholism became expectations, and I was imposing that on other people. And I would say that was probably quite a few years ago.
So the part that made the work ethic cross that line and turn into workaholism was when you started to impose upon your family members this importance of carrying on with getting a degree and getting higher and higher and higher degree.
Well, and just doing, take the garbage out, cut the lawn, blah, blah, blah.
So just to clarify, you were telling your family members to do.
Yeah. You get me, Susan, you get me.
Okay, I get her. So there's 2 different kinds of reflecting. there's simple reflections and complex reflections. So what did that feel like to you, Laurie? Was that a complex or a simple reflection?
I think it was a complex reflection because you put a lot of things I said into a cohesive whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what it was from your point of view, it was a complex reflection because I put a lot of things into one whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, was that simple or complex, that reflection?
I'm going to say that was another complex reflection.
Okay, you're telling me I do lots of complex reflections.
You do complex reflections well, Susan.
So I'm trying to do a simple reflection. So a simple reflection would be,
I just
Kate,
did
do you have
one.
a simple reflection for Laurie? Oh, there you go. So, Kate, do you have one, a simple reflection?
Sounds like it was a lot of work.
Ah,
Mhm, mhm.
yeah. So simple reflections are just basically reflecting back what you're hearing the person say, and complex reflections adding a little bit of an interpretation to
Yeah.
what you're hearing the person say to help it kind of elicit a little bit of change talk.
Mhm.
So that's the difference between simple and complex reflections. So when you're talking with somebody, you want to start with just trying simple reflections, just reflecting back exactly what the person said. And then eventually you can put in the interpretation. And sometimes you're going to get, when you put in a complex reflection, you're going to get people saying, no, that's not what I meant at all.
Mhm.
And then that's good information to have, because it means, okay, that's the wrong path to go down. And sometimes complex reflections will take you in the direction. The whole idea is to find the change talk, to find what's gonna hit with them. When Laurie said, "You get me," that's what you want. Because when somebody is thinking, "You get me," they're going to be much more interested and much more engaged in the process. Okay.
One thing
So that's reflecting. Summarize. Okay, go ahead, Kay.
I was just going back to Siobhan's question about, I know it's bad for me, it's harming my relationships, but I really like it. I think one of the things with reflection is it really helps not get ahead of where the other person is at. It may be blindingly obvious to you that this person, in this case, their drinking is problematic, but that doesn't mean it's blindingly obvious to that person, right? And until that person is able to see it clearly, it's difficult for them to change it. So that's, I think, what the beauty of being reflective and being slow and staying with the person, not getting ahead, not jumping to conclusions, even though you think that it sounds like they get it and they're ready to move forward and make change, they may not feel that way. Mm-hmm. So you're always having to go back and check with that person that you're talking to or that you're connecting with to make sure that you are accurate in where they feel, not where you think they're at.
That's so beautifully said. That's lovely. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Because if you think you know where they are at and they're not there, that's really the writing reflex. Yeah. It's not guiding. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so in the essence of time, so summarizing is actually just a long reflection. Yeah. So we'll just carry on with that from that. And then we go to so the first thing that we want to do is we want to have, we want to be engaging. And this is what, when Laurie said, "You get me," that's what engaging is. You want the person to say, "You get me," or that maybe they're not saying it, but they're thinking it. And you can see it in their body language. They sit back, they get relaxed, they get comfortable, And then they just start to kind of say whatever is going on for them, because they know at that point that you're not going to judge them. You're just going to hear where they're at, and you're going to go from there. Anything to add to the engaging?
Yeah, I think when
Yeah.
people feel validated in that process, then they're comfortable and safe to explore, to move forward. They don't have to stay in a defensive position.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Yep. And then focusing. So once and engaging can take 3 minutes, and it can take 3 years. And you can, you just slowly, quietly work at it. Keep checking if the person gets you, if you get the person, if the person thinks you get them. That's what you want to do with engaging. And so know that engaging can be a very, very long process. It doesn't happen necessarily instantaneously. Sometimes it can, but a lot of times it doesn't. So you just keep working it and working it and working it and working it by using the oars. That's how you work it. Do that reflecting and that validation that Kay was talking about, and then you'll slowly get, the person will feel like you get them. And once they feel like you get them, then you focus in on what it is you want to change, what it is the thing. So it's a bit of a process to get to the stage where you're actually focusing in on what it is you want to change. And then you start evoking change talk. And evoking change talk is, you want to find the client's motivation for change. What is the person's motivation for change? If you can figure out what the person's motivations for change are with their help, or help them to say what their motivation for change is, then that's where they're going to start to decide to make a difference. Anybody want to say anything more about that? This is evoking is like, there's lots of steps and lots of teaching with evoking. So that's very much in a nutshell, the evoking stage. You use the oars. You always go back to oars and just keep perfecting oars until these other processes work better and better. Yeah. To me, motivational interviewing is this thing I use in my counseling with people, but it's definitely the foundation of what I use. I use it all the time, and it doesn't necessarily make the complete change that is required in the situation, but it is a very, very, very strong foundation. Kay and Laurie, what about you? Do you use it a lot?
I do use it in my practice, and thank you for saying that evoking is more than this word on a slide. It's actually very complex, and there are a lot of sub-steps to it. But yeah, I think that is the essence of understanding. It's the pivot point. Hey, Susan, it's the pivot point for change, is when you evoke the change talk. And so with my clients, it's like, why do you want to change? What are your reasons for change? Do you have what it takes to change? And why do you think you need to change? And that's 4 questions. And so as Kay said, it's pacing as well. This work takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about people in the audience, and, if you have a family member or someone that you love or care about that you're worried about, and you see, maybe things are going to not go well for them down the road. I think these skills are useful in that context too. It's easier to use them in a professional setting. That's what it's set up to do. But I have used these skills in my family life and my personal life, and they have served me really well on a number of levels. Even just knowing just doing very simple things, using motivational techniques in a very simple way, can be really helpful and really empowering to another person.
Mhm. Yep, I agree 100%. Yeah. And so the planning stage is the last stage that you get to, and you don't want to rush to the planning stage. All these other stages are going to take time, which I know sounds weird in terms of that you only hear with the client. But yeah, if you go too fast with planning, it's just not going to stick. Anything else to say about that?
I think that's the key there is, eliciting from that other person what they see as their pathway forward. It's maybe easy for you to see the pathway forward, but it has to be meaningful to
Yeah.
that other person.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's a key component of it, because nobody's going to make any kind of change if they don't think it's meaningful to them. Yeah. Yeah, so that is motivational interviewing in a nutshell. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our presentation. That is very definitely motivational interviewing in a very brief nutshell. But so let's just go through the Kahoot questions that we started at the beginning when we had all those technical glitches, and see if you can answer the questions now. So in what order do we progress through the stages of change? And the answers are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. And then the next question is, the most important idea for harm reduction is to focus on stopping use. And the answer to that is false. Now we know that it's not stopping use, it's about reducing the harms. Successful change with problematic substance use is aided by, here we go, is aided by medication and connection. We didn't really talk a lot about medication, but it's definitely that. And hopefully you can see by now that connection is extremely important in terms of substance, changing substance. A website that provides information on addiction is, so here's 3, the Canadian Institute of Substance Use Research, CISUR, Smart Recovery, which we haven't talked about yet, but Smart Recovery is like a peer-led recovery program. It's people like it who don't like AA or NA, they like Smart Recovery. It's not so much about the religious part of it all, it's more about skills and tools. And you can take a course to become a peer facilitator of Smart Recovery. So you can look on it's not very expensive, and if you want to, you can, and somebody could start a Smart Recovery group here on Galliano Island or whatever island you're on. That would be really super excellent. And another website is the British Columbia Center for Disease Control. That had all the stats and facts. That's where I got all that information from. So, and there's tons of addiction websites, but those are 3. Motivational interviewing focuses on finding the person's own reasons for change. Very important. It's everything that Kay and Laurie and I were talking about. So that is true. And in motivational interviewing, the helper is engaging, guiding, and evoking. So with the key thing there of all that of guiding though. And hey, so this is another phone thing. So we'll try it, see if it works. Maybe before we do it though, I'll just say we'll share this PowerPoint with you. Here's the, for Island Health, the Galliano Island Mental Health and Substance Use, you can either phone the front office, which is located on Salt Spring Island, 538-4711, and self-refer yourself to the mental health and substance use, or you can phone my direct line, which is 539-0034. If you phone that, just know that I only work part-time, so I don't answer. I work 2 days a week, so I'll be answering 2 days a week. And then there's some websites with resources. Smart Recovery. The Umbrella Society of Victoria has a ton of services that are not so much through Island Health, so that's helpful. And RAC, Rapid Access Addiction Clinic, is also in Victoria and is designed so that you don't have to go through the whole intake process to access services. So those are 3 services that are close by Galiano Library that you can, and there's lots more, but that is those, and we will share this with you so that you'll have it.
Susan, there's a question in the chat.
And we also have seen. Okay.
Is self-referral okay? Somebody's asking in the chat box.
Self-referral is absolutely okay. Yeah. Yeah, you can, yeah, you don't need to go to yourself. And everybody, and nobody has to pay. It all is paid for by your tax dollars through Island Health. So yeah, it's free, and I do my best to see everybody as quickly as possible. And so then we have all of these references and websites that you can go chat, and so now go back and is play from current slide. Okay, so this is once again, so you go, you're going to go to poll everywhere, and we're going to make a word cloud about what you have to take away from today. Question is, something that caused me to think differently today is, and you're gonna, you access it by going to type in your text box 37607 to join, and then type in, once you've typed in 37607, text Susan Van Ath 968. And so then you just text and answer this question, something that caused me to think differently is, and it'll just come up in this, it's anonymous, nobody will know who typed it, anything. And we'll just see what the answers are. We'll create a word cloud of what caused people to think differently this time around. So once again, the number that you type in is 37607 in the text, in your text box. And then once you get there, type in Susan Van Ass E 968. Oh. Okay. My tech support is saying that we might not be able to do it, but let's give it another minute to see if it works. It's a bummer if it doesn't work because it's very cool. Yay, there we go. Somebody said something. Cool. So, and this would be also a good time while people are doing this, if you have any questions that you want to ask while people are typing things in, or if you want any clarification, follow this. Cool. The topic of addiction and changing substance use and behaviors, problematic behaviors, is vast and huge. And Kay has taught at the college level these courses for many, 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 many years can tell you that it's vast and huge. And you know, the more that you kind of look at it, the more amazing it is, really. So here we go. We've got some things that cause people to look differently: compassion, harm reduction, lists, tips. Beautiful. And that is the end. Oh, there we go. Some more demos. Oh, lovely. Yeah. So I want to thank everybody for joining, and also Kay and Laurie for taking time out of their Sundays to do this. It has been a joy and a pleasure to work once again with the two of you. So lovely.
And I also want to say thank you to everyone. It's been so informative. Susan, thank you, and thank you for bringing on Laurie and Kay. It's been enlightening, and you know, the opportunity to have you share your knowledge and wisdom has been quite incredible.
Mm.
And it's great that, you know, we're going to, you know, this has been recorded, and we'll be able to have it on our YouTube station. So this is wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for asking me. And yeah, thank you for asking me. It truly has been a joy. Laurie and Kay, do you want to say anything to say goodbye?
Just thanks, everyone. It's always nice to talk about your passion.
Yeah, I was grateful to share the time and space with everyone tonight. Great questions, really engaging.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.